"We protect our own." Those words rang out with authority as more than 200 leather-clad bikers filled every corner of Alicia's tiny diner. Just 20. 4 hours earlier, she had bravely stood up for a lone Hell's Angel, being unjustly harassed by the local sheriff. Alicia never imagined that her small act of courage would shake the entire town of Red Valley. What happened next would bring the town to tears, challenge the deeply ingrained prejudices in their hearts, and remind everyone that true bravery often emerges from the most unexpected places. Alicia Bennett stood silently behind the counter, her gaze fixed on the electric bill stamped in dark red ink with the word urgent. She sighed, feeling her heart grow heavier each day as she thought about her diner's uncertain future, the only legacy her father had left behind after falling ill. A year and a half ago, Alicia's life was completely different. She was a skilled nurse at a major Atlanta hospital, living in a modest yet modern apartment, with a bright future ahead of her. But everything changed with a midnight phone call. Her father, James Bennett, the man who had devoted his life to the family diner, had suffered a massive stroke, leaving him bedridden and unable to run the restaurant. Without hesitation, Alicia left everything behind and returned to Red Valley, the small town where she grew up, filled with cherished memories. She knew the diner was more than just a business. It was her father's life's work, the heart and soul of her family. Since childhood, Alicia had watched her father rise at dawn, stand by the scorching grill for hours, serving each customer with a warm smile and kind eyes. But now, all of that felt like a distant memory. Customers dwindled by the day as the town's economy sank after the steel mill's closure. Her father's longtime friends now visited only out of pity, not hunger. Alicia tried everything, revamping the menu, working 16-hour days, even slashing prices, but still couldn't keep people coming through the door. Clutching the bill, Alicia's sad brown eyes wandered back to the empty street. Neighboring shops had shut down one by one, replaced by cold for lease signs. More than once, she wondered what she was fighting for. Was she clinging to a past that no longer existed? The doorbell jarred her from her gloomy thoughts. 3 familiar regulars stepped inside, offering sympathetic nods as if to encourage her to keep going just a little longer. Alicia forced a smile, hiding the bitterness welling up inside her. She slipped into the kitchen, lit the old gas stove, and moved swiftly to prepare their meals, though her mind remained with her father. Every night after closing, Alicia drove to the nursing home to sit by his side, talking to him even though she knew he couldn't respond. She often wondered, if he could still think, would he be proud of his daughter fighting to keep his legacy alive? Alicia glanced at the dusty clock on the wall, its hands still ticking steadily, reminding her that time was slipping away. She bit her lip and whispered to herself, "I just need to try a little harder. For Dad, I won't give up." What Alicia didn't know was that tomorrow would bring a mysterious visitor, a surprise that would change her life forever, and transform the small town of Red Valley. The next morning, the sun had barely risen when its weak warmth slipped through the old window pane, rousing Alicia from the restless thoughts of the night before. She still felt fatigued after a fitful sleep, but told herself that today would be a fresh start, and maybe more customers would come in. With that hopeful thought, she carefully unlocked the diner's door and prepared to greet the day's first patrons. A soft chime announced the arrival of her regulars, who filed in one by one with hurried but friendly hellos, just enough to lift some of the familiar gloom that hung over the little diner. Alicia took their orders and hurried back to the kitchen to start cooking. The familiar sizzle of eggs hitting the hot pan and the rhythm of her knife tapping the countertop eased her worries about unpaid bills, if only for a moment. Then, abruptly, everything went quiet as the roar of a Harley-Davidson engine thundered outside, drowning out every other sound. Alicia frowned, glancing toward the window. At that moment, the diner's door swung open again, and a tall man stepped inside. He looked to be in his early 50s, broad-shouldered and muscular, his weathered face framed by deep lines. His faded leather jacket and the glimpses of old tattoos beneath it left no doubt who he was. Marcus Reed, a veteran Hell's Angel bearing that notorious gang's threatening emblem. Instantly, the atmosphere grew thick with tension. The regulars fell silent and avoided his gaze. A few pretended to busy themselves with their coffee. At a corner table, Mrs. Dorothy Watson, a kindly older woman, clutched her granddaughter's hand, worry etched in her eyes. Alicia froze for a heartbeat, dish towel still in hand. She met Marcus's eyes, heart pounding, the ugly rumors about Hell's Angels echoing in her mind. But then she recalled her father's teaching. Every customer deserves kindness and respect. Noticing the unease around him, Marcus bowed his head slightly, avoiding the suspicious stares, and made his way to the farthest seat from everyone else. Alicia drew a steadying breath, plastered on a warm smile, and approached him. "Good morning," she said softly, setting a glass of ice water in front of him. "What can I get for you today?" Marcus lifted his gaze, and in that instant, Alicia saw something unexpected. Not the menace people whispered about, but a deep sorrow mingled with exhaustion in his eyes. His voice was gravelly but gentle. "Black coffee, strong as you've got, and whatever's quickest. I've ridden a long way." "Right away," Alicia nodded. As she turned toward the kitchen, she caught sight of Marcus's hands trembling slightly around the glass, and on his wrist a glimpse of a hospital band peeked from under his worn leather sleeve. Back in the kitchen, Alicia's mind raced. There was something about Marcus that stirred both her compassion and curiosity, a silent desperation she'd seen countless times as a nurse, people bearing pain they could not speak. Outside, the tension lingered. Through the window, Alicia saw her regulars whispering nervously, their old fears and prejudices toward the Hell's Angels reignited by his presence. A chill ran down her spine. She had a feeling today would bring more than just another customer. Unbeknownst to her, Marcus Reed's arrival would set in motion a tide of trouble and danger, forcing Alicia and the entire town of Red Valley into a whirlwind of upheaval and dramatic choices. While the tense whispers still lingered around the tables, Alicia quickly returned with a cup of extra, strong black coffee, and a steaming plate of toast. Marcus Reed sat motionless in the corner stool by the counter, his eyes glazed over as he stared into the empty space before him, completely absorbed in his own world. "Here's your coffee, sir, and our hottest toast," Alicia said softly, as she set the dishes before Marcus, her voice gentle and sincere, as if to dispel some of the tension hanging over the little diner. Marcus looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing his face, as though it had been ages since anyone had spoken to him so kindly. "Thank you, miss," he replied quietly, his tone softening, though his eyes still bore the same exhaustion and sorrow. In that brief moment, Alicia saw past the biker's tough exterior. Beneath the thick leather jacket and tangled tattoos, Marcus's face held a profound grief. She remembered the eyes of so many patients she'd cared for as a nurse, the look of people bearing pain, helpless and desperate in the face of their fate. Something compelled her, an overwhelming empathy that made her ask gently, "Are you all right? You look like you've been through a lot." Marcus's hands, tough and calloused, trembled as he gripped his coffee. He was silent for a long moment, as if debating whether to open up. Then, perhaps moved by the genuine concern in Alicia's eyes, he broke his silence. "I just came from Riverside Hospital. My daughter, Emily, She has cancer. It's terminal. The doctors say there isn't much time left. His last words shook him, each one seeming to wrench his heart. Alicia felt as if her own heart was being squeezed. She had witnessed many kinds of suffering as a nurse, but the agony of a father powerless to save his child was almost unbearable. "I'm so sorry," Alicia whispered, her voice full of compassion and sincerity, without a hint of pretense. "I can't imagine how hard this is for you." Marcus nodded slowly, his gaze drifting as though lost in painful memories. "Emily is all I have left. When my wife passed away, I promised I'd protect her, that I'd never let anything hurt her. But now, all I can do is sit here and watch my daughter slip away." His voice cracked, and he quickly turned his face away, trying to hide the silent tears tracing down the deep lines of his cheek. Alicia fell silent, a mix of helplessness and sympathy welling up inside her, driving her to offer what little comfort she could. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder, a sincere, tender gesture imbued with understanding. "Emily knows how much you love her. Sometimes the most meaningful thing we can do is simply be there in the moments that matter most." Marcus turned back to look at Alicia, and for the first time his eyes held a glimmer of relief, a warmth born from finally being understood. A hardened biker who'd weathered countless storms, yet in his darkest hour, he still needed someone to share his burden. But that moment of connection was shattered by the sudden clang of the door swinging open. Sheriff Kyle Brennan and Deputy Tyler Collins strode in, their confident, almost arrogant bearing cutting through the warmth. Brennan's sharp eyes swept the diner and locked onto Marcus with instant suspicion. Alicia felt the chill of tension descend once more, like a cold fog drifting through the room. Sheriff Brennan spoke up in a mocking tone, loud enough for everyone to hear. Well, looks like we've got a special guest today. Didn't expect the Hells Angels to take an interest in Little Red Valley." Marcus fell silent again, his face hardening back into the icy mask everyone expected. But Alicia sensed the fury simmering beneath the surface. Looking into Brennan's provocative gaze, Alicia realized that today, neither she nor Marcus would easily escape this whirlwind of trouble. Yet she also resolved that no matter what happened, she would never abandon her faith in truth and justice, lessons her father had instilled in her all her life. Because Alicia knew that sometimes genuine kindness is the strongest weapon against prejudice and darkness. And this was only the beginning. The moment Sheriff Brennan's provocative words died away, the air in the diner grew heavy, as if a cold mist had rolled in. All the regulars fell silent, their heads bowed to avoid Brennan's steely gaze, as if they all knew that speaking up now would only invite trouble. Alicia could feel the tension ratcheting up. She caught a flash of fury in Marcus's eyes, but he quickly masked it with his usual impassive expression. He didn't even look at Brennan. He simply lifted his coffee cup to his lips, as though he wished to have nothing more to do with the newcomers. Brennan let a smug smile creep across his face and stepped deliberately toward Marcus's seat, Deputy Tyler Collins trailing behind. Collins was young and a bit hesitant, but his eyes betrayed total deference to his superior. Both men wore crisp blue uniforms, their shiny badges a deliberate reminder of the authority they claimed over this small town. "Marcus Reed, isn't it?" Brennan called out, his voice heavy with accusation, as if addressing a long, wanted criminal. Marcus remained silent for a heartbeat, then met Brennan's gaze with a calm but unbowed expression. "That's right, I'm Marcus Reed. Is there a problem, Sheriff?" Brennan glanced at Collins, then curled his lip into a mocking smirk. "Oh, nothing major. Just so you know, Red Valley is a peaceful place. We don't take kindly to types like you causing any incidents." A wave of indignation pinched Alicia's chest. She'd seen Brennan's treatment of outsiders before, especially those he didn't like, but this open prejudice and heavy-handedness angered her too much to stay silent. "I think Mr. Reed is just here for a meal, Sheriff," Alicia said firmly, meeting Brennan's stare head-on. "He hasn't done anything wrong." Sheriff Brennan turned to her, eyebrows raised in a mix of surprise and irritation. In that moment, Alicia saw the cold lines etched deep into his face, the face of a man used to wielding power to intimidate and control. "Alicia Bennett," Brennan said, his tone slow and deliberate. "I don't believe you should interfere with police business. We're just making sure this town stays safe." "I understand you think you're protecting the town," Alicia replied evenly, though her heart pounded. "But Mr. Reed is simply drinking his coffee. He's caused no trouble." The diner grew even more suffocatingly still. Brennan moved closer to Marcus, his gaze razor-sharp as he tested the biker's limit. "You know," Brennan continued loudly for all to hear, "I've dealt with Hell's Angels before. Smuggling, drugs, violence. I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about." Marcus gripped his coffee cup so tightly his knuckles whitened, yet he remained astonishingly composed. He looked Brennan straight in the eye and replied quietly, but with firm authority, "I'm not responsible for what you think about me or my club, Sheriff. I just want to finish my coffee and get back to the hospital to see my daughter." Brennan let out a derisive laugh and shook his head, clearly unconvinced. "A touching family story, huh? You really think a leather jacket and a logo make me buy it?" Rage flared inside Alicia. She knew Marcus was telling the truth. She knew Brennan was picking on him simply because of that logo, and she decided then and there that she would not allow such injustice to stand in her diner. "Sheriff Brennan?" Alicia stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "Unless you have any real reason beyond judging Mr. Reed's attire, I insist you let my customer eat in peace. This diner welcomes everyone, so long as they behave respectfully." Brennan met her gaze, and for the first time his eyes flashed pure anger. But he also realized he'd met unexpected resistance in Alicia, a reaction he hadn't anticipated. The tension in the diner was so thick you could almost hear every breath. Alicia stood firm beneath that cold stare, knowing she'd just stepped into a battle far from over. But deep in her heart, she believed defending what was right was never a mistake, no matter how hard the consequences might be. What Alicia didn't know was that today's confrontation was only the beginning, and the fiercest days were yet to come. Sheriff Brennan glared at Alicia. The surprise in his eyes quickly hardened into unmistakable displeasure. In that moment, the air in the diner felt as if it had frozen solid, every customer's gaze fixed on the tense confrontation unfolding before them. "You said what, Alicia?" Brennan's voice dropped to a menacing growl, as if daring her to think twice before speaking again. "I believe you heard me loud and clear, Sheriff," Alicia answered firmly. Though her voice was soft, it carried a rare strength and resolve. "You have no right to harass my customer just because you don't like the jacket he's wearing." Sheriff Brennan's eyebrow arched, a cruel smirk curling at the corner of his mouth. In his icy gaze, Alicia caught the prejudices and arrogance of a man accustomed to standing above everyone else. He turned toward her, stepping closer, his voice barely above a whisper but unmistakable to all. "Do you know who you're talking to, Alicia? I'm the one who keeps this whole town safe. And you, rather than stand with the good people of Red Valley, choose to side with a lowlife like him?" He jerked his chin toward Marcus with blatant contempt. Alicia inhaled deeply, feeling her heart pound as if it might burst from her chest. Still, she knew there was no turning back now. She squared her shoulders, met Brennan's challenging stare, and answered with confidence. "I'm standing up for what's right, Sheriff. Mr. Reed hasn't done anything wrong, and I won't let you abuse your power to treat him unfairly." A ripple of anxious whispers ran through the customers. They knew how powerful Brennan was in this small town, and that he didn't easily tolerate defeat. Brennan's face grew colder, his eyes flashing a fury barely restrained. "Look here, girl," Brennan began, his tone threatening as he closed the distance even more. "You'd better think long and hard. Red Valley is a small town. Everybody here knows each other. If you keep going against the town's best interests, siding with this so-called criminal in leather, don't blame the townsfolk when they turn their backs on you." He paused, delivering a chilling smile of challenge, then added in a voice sharp as a blade, "Believe me, Alicia, no one wants to support a diner that sides with troublemakers like the Hell's Angels. You'll lose every customer, everything your father built. Don't lose it all just to play the hero." Each word hit Alicia like a dagger to the heart, the threat's danger closing in around her. Yet alongside the fear, a fierce indignation swelled within her, giving her the strength to stand her ground. "Sheriff Brennan," Alicia said, her voice clear and ringing through the heavy silence, "my father always taught me that every person deserves respect, no matter how they look or what others think of them. If you think I'll abandon his lessons because of your threats, you're sorely mistaken." Marcus looked up at Alicia, gratitude and surprise mingling in his eyes. Clearly, no one had ever defended him like this before, especially not in front of someone with Brennan's authority. Brennan ground his teeth, his face flushed with anger. "Fine, Alicia, you've made your choice, but mark my words, when this town turns its back on you, when not a soul steps foot in your little diner again, you'll realize how foolish you were to side with a man like him." With that, he spun on his heel and stormed out of the diner, radiating fury and arrogance. Deputy Collins hesitated, glancing uncertainly at Alicia, then hurried to catch up with his sheriff. The door slammed shut behind them, marking a change that could never be undone. Silence enveloped the diner. The regulars looked at Alicia with wary, sympathetic eyes. She stood perfectly still, hands trembling slightly, yet her expression remained as calm as she could muster. Marcus set his coffee cup down and met her gaze with deep, sincere respect. "Thank you, Alicia. I know that wasn't easy for you." Alicia managed a faint smile, staring at the spot where Brennan had just stood, still charged with menace. "I just did what was right, Mr. Reed," she said softly, but deep inside, worry crept in over the fallout from today's showdown with the sheriff. She understood that, right or wrong, her decision would bring far greater challenges than she had ever imagined. And the scariest part was believing Sheriff Brennan might just be right, that the town could very well turn its back on the place she'd always called home. The days after my showdown with Sheriff Brennan dragged on in an eerie silence, and Alicia's little diner, already struggling, grew even colder and emptier. Brennan's chilling threat had swiftly become reality. In a small town like Red Valley, word spread fast that Alicia had dared to defend a Hell's Angel, and the fallout was brutal. Every morning, when Alicia unlocked the door, her heart twisted at the sight of cold stares and neighbors turning away. Once, regular customers passed by without so much as a glance. One gloomy dawn, she froze in horror at the scribbled message scrawled across the glass door in hateful red paint. "Don't serve those bikers. Get out of our town, you black leather bitch." Alicia's hands shook as she wiped the words away. No matter how clean the glass became, the shame and pain stayed etched in her soul. All her life she'd believed Red Valley was warm and welcoming, her home, her father's home. Now she saw the ugly truth. Beneath its peaceful facade lurked a deep, cruel darkness, ready to strike anyone who challenged its old prejudices. Her regulars vanished one by one. Dorothy Watson, once a friendly neighbor, now averted her eyes whenever they crossed paths. Dave and Sarah Hill, the couple who'd come in for breakfast every day, walked right past her diner as if she'd never been part of their lives. Their cold indifference left Alicia feeling more isolated in her own hometown than she had ever been. To make matters worse, her bills piled up. Electric, water, rent. The debt numbers climbed daily, squeezing the last drop of hope from her. On some days, she didn't sell enough coffee to cover the cost of the beans. She forced herself not to cry whenever she glanced at her father's photo on the wall, the man who'd spent his life building this diner, trusting his daughter to carry on. One late afternoon, while sitting alone in the empty diner, the door chime tinkled gently. Alicia looked up, heart fluttering with hope. But the only person who stepped in was Deputy Tyler Collins, the same officer who'd stood behind Brennan that day, his expression apologetic and awkward. "Alicia," Tyler said quietly, his voice trembling, "I'm really sorry about how things turned out." She met his gaze, her bitterness barely hidden. "Is that all you came to say, Tyler?" He shifted uncomfortably, eyes scanning the empty room. "You know how it is. Brennan's the most powerful man in town. No one dares cross him. Maybe you should reconsider. Maybe things would get better." Alicia looked him dead in the eye, her tone gentle but unshakable. "I don't regret defending Mr. Reed. What saddens me is how easily this town turned its back on me just because I stood up for what's right." Tyler sighed, helplessness in his eyes. He turned and left without another word. The door closed softly, but the sound shattered Alicia's heart. That night, in the small house behind the diner, Alicia sat alone under the faint glow of a single lamp, staring at her father's smiling portrait. Hot tears she'd held back for days finally fell, each one burning with loss and defiance. She knew her choice to protect Marcus Reed had cost her everything: peace of mind, her livelihood, maybe even her future. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a small flame of faith remained. No matter how hard it got, doing what's right was always worth it. She vowed that even if the whole world turned its back on her, Alicia would stand tall and face it all, because she believed that one day justice and genuine kindness would triumph over the darkness of prejudice. What she didn't know was that, hundreds of miles away from Red Valley, Marcus Reed was already telling his brothers about her courage, a story poised to bring Alicia an unexpected miracle she could never have imagined. Amid those dark, seemingly endless days, Alicia had nearly grown used to the haunting quiet of her empty diner. But that afternoon, as the pale late day sun filtered gently down the silent street, the diner's door chime rang out unexpectedly, shattering the oppressive stillness that had settled in for far too long. Alicia looked up, her surprise barely masked by cautious curiosity. Standing before her were two strangers, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a face etched by time, and beside him a woman whose warm, gentle eyes seemed to glow with kindness. What drew Alicia's attention immediately, though, was the leather jacket the man wore, its small Hell's Angels patch stitched over his heart. "Excuse me, are you Alicia Bennett?" the man asked, his voice rich and respectful. Alicia nodded, a churn of questions rising in her chest. "Yes, I'm Alicia. May I ask who you are?" The man offered a kindly smile, stepped forward, and extended his hand. I'm Thomas Reed, and this is my wife, Sarah. Marcus Reed, the man you defended the other day, is my brother." In that instant, Alicia felt a rush of relief and gratitude in Thomas's gentle tone and steady gaze. She clasped his hand, a cool breeze of comfort seeming to ease some of the tension that had gripped her heart. Sarah moved forward, taking Alicia's hand in both of hers. "We've heard everything Marcus told us about what you did for him. Believe me, Alicia, our family is deeply grateful. It takes real courage to stand up the way you did, especially given everything you've already endured." Alicia's cheeks flushed with unexpected emotion. She had never imagined that a simple act of protecting someone from injustice could touch others so profoundly. "I only did what my father always taught me. Stand up for what's right," she replied softly. Thomas's eyes glistened with gratitude and a hint of sorrow as he spoke of Marcus. Marcus has faced so much misunderstanding because of his leather jacket, but truly he's a devoted father and a good man, especially now when his daughter Emily's life hangs in the balance. Hearing Emily's name, Alicia felt her heart tighten. She remembered Marcus's anguished eyes when he spoke of his daughter. "How is Emily doing?" she asked, her voice threaded with concern. Sarah sighed, tears welling in her eyes. "Not well, Alicia. Emily is in critical condition at Riverside Hospital. The doctors say time may be running out." Thomas gently squeezed Sarah's shoulder, drawing strength for both of them, then turned back to Alicia with resolute sadness in his voice. "Marcus told us that when he was at his lowest, your kindness gave him the strength to keep going. He said that if a stranger like you could trust and defend him, he had to stay strong too, for his daughter's sake." Thomas's words brought tears to Alicia's eyes. She realized that her small gesture had given Marcus a glimmer of hope in his darkest hour. "We came today," Thomas continued, his gaze earnest and deep, "not only to thank you, but also to let you know you're not alone in this fight. We understand the price you've paid for your bravery and compassion. Marcus will never forget what you did, and neither will we." Sarah clasped Alicia's hand again, her tone firm with promise. "And we won't just thank you with words, Alicia. The Hell's Angels are like family. We stick together and protect one another. When someone helps us in our darkest hour, we never abandon them." Alicia looked at them, her heart a tangle of gratitude, relief, and a little apprehension at the weight of their promise. Yet, for the first time in days of fatigue and despair, she felt she was no longer alone. Thomas met Alicia's eyes with a determined sparkle. "Trust us, Alicia. You stood up for Marcus. Now it's our turn to stand up for you." The diner's door chime rang again as Thomas and Sarah stepped outside, but this time the sound felt warm and hopeful rather than cold and lonely. It heralded a fresh change, a spark of hope amid the darkness Alicia had been enduring. She gazed out at Red Valley's quiet street bathed in the soft glow of sunset, a new belief blooming in her heart. Perhaps, after all the loss and pain, human kindness and courage would light her way forward. What Alicia didn't know was that today's meeting with Thomas and Sarah was only the beginning, ushering in a series of unexpected events that, before long, would transform her life and the fate of this small town forever. The next morning, as Alicia unlocked the diner door, her mind still half full of anxiety and half hope from yesterday's visit, she suddenly heard the distant rumble of powerful motorcycle engines. At first, just a faint rumble. The sound quickly swelled into a full, throated roar that shook Red Valley's sleepy little main street. Heart pounding, Alicia rushed outside and froze. Leading the parade was Thomas Reed, his gaze steady and determined. Behind him, Row after row of gleaming Harleys rolled to a stop, each one ridden by a man or woman clad head to toe in Hell's Angels leather. One by one, more than 200 bikers dismounted, forming a proud, silent line that stretched the length of the street. Within minutes, townsfolk gathered in odd clusters before Alicia's diner, their murmurs a mix of shock and curiosity tinged with unease. Sheriff Brennan stood off to one side, arms folded, his face a mask of cold fury. Alicia could almost hear his thoughts. Horror at seeing the very isolation he'd tried to impose on her dissolve under the solidarity of these strangers. Thomas stepped forward, his expression warm as if greeting a cherished sister. "We hope we didn't startle you too badly," he said with a friendly nod, though in his eyes, Alicia read both deep respect and solemn purpose. "We're here for you, Alicia, to thank you for your courage and kindness to Marcus and our family." Alicia took in the familiar, yet unexpected faces of the bikers she'd once feared. People she never dreamed would become her staunchest allies. Her voice trembled as she replied, I don't know what to say except thank you all for coming." From among the group, a salt and pepper-haired man with a rugged but gentle face stepped forward. His deep voice carried over the hushed crowd. "Alicia, your bravery moved us all. Marcus isn't just one of us, he's family. When you stood up for him, you stood up for every Hell's Angel here, and we never forget friends like you." At that, the bikers erupted into applause. Townspeople watched, stunned, as their long-held fears gave way to wonder. In that moment, Alicia's standing in Red Valley changed. She was no longer the outcast, but the honored guest of a formidable, grateful community. Sheriff Brennan stormed forward, tension coiled in his shoulders. "You really think riding in here will change anything? This town doesn't need your kind of troublemakers," he spat. Thomas met Brennan's glare with calm dignity. "Sheriff Brennan, we came here in peace, to show our gratitude to someone who dared do what was right. That's worth celebrating in any community." Brennan ground his teeth, his power play unraveling before the entire town. Without another word, he turned on his heel and stalked away, leaving behind a palpable release of tension. One by one, Red Valley's residents stepped closer to the bikers. Curiosity replaced fear as they struck up conversations, discovering that beneath the leather jackets were ordinary people with real, relatable stories. Alicia watched, her chest warming with emotion. Yesterday, her diner had been a lonely, silent tomb. Today, it was the stage for something extraordinary, where courage and kindness were honored at last. Thomas placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're not alone, Alicia. Hell's Angels protect those who protect us, and you've become family." For the first time in days, a true spark of hope lit Alicia's heart. In that instant, she knew that bravery and sincerity are light strong enough to shatter any darkness or prejudice. What she didn't realize, though, was that today's triumph was just the beginning. Her choice to do what was right was about to reshape not only her life, but the future of this whole little town. That day, for the first time in many long, gloomy weeks, Alicia's little diner burst with vibrant life. Locals crowded in to see the extraordinary spectacle. Laughter and conversation filled the air. The growl of motorcycle engines blended with the clink of coffee cups, and a warm, energetic buzz swept through Red Valley's main street. Alicia darted from table to table, her hands flying as she served coffee and pastries, her face radiating a joy she hadn't felt in ages. The Hells Angels bikers weren't just here to thank her. They were showing solidarity with their wallets, too. They ordered constantly, and often insisted on paying far more than their bills, offering the most genuine, practical support for Alicia's diner. At one corner table sat Thomas Reed and his wife, Sarah. Thomas chatted amiably with curious locals who were finally asking about the club, while also keeping a protective eye on Alicia, just like a big brother watching over his sister. He knew their presence wasn't only rescuing her business, it was sending a powerful message that courage and compassion always outshine prejudice and fear. Across the street, Sheriff Brennan and Deputy Tyler Collins stood side by side. Brennan's glare was ice, cold and sharp as a knife, spiked with anger and helplessness as he watched his plan to isolate Alicia crumble before him. He said nothing, but the tension in his rigid posture and clenched fists spoke volumes to Tyler. "You okay, Sheriff?" Tyler asked hesitantly, anxiety in his voice. Brennan drew a slow, bitter breath. "Does she think rolling these bikers in here makes her victorious over me? Alicia's gone too far, Tyler. I won't let this stand." Tyler looked at Brennan with worry. He could feel the sheriff losing his grip on the situation, losing to the power of unity and bravery that Alicia had sparked in this tiny town. Tyler didn't want to get any deeper into this conflict, but he knew once Brennan was determined, nothing would be simple. Inside the diner, Alicia served a coffee with tears of emotion in her eyes as she took in the scene. Bikers who'd once seemed so fierce now, laughing with townsfolk as if they were old friends. Even those who had turned their backs on her weeks ago were tentatively stepping inside, testing the atmosphere and realizing how wrong their old prejudices had been. Dorothy Watson, who hadn't dared enter the diner for weeks, now stood chatting happily with a silver-haired female biker. They swapped stories about life and family, discovering they had far more in common than they'd ever imagined. And Dave and Sarah Hill, the couple who had once walked past without a glance, approached Alicia with genuine regret. "Alicia," Dave said earnestly, eyes full of remorse, "we judged you too quickly. Thank you for having the courage to do what was right." His words choked Alicia up. She looked at Dave and Sarah with forgiveness and gratitude. What matters is that we recognize what's truly worth standing up for, isn't it? Amid that atmosphere of unity, Alicia glanced out the window and locked eyes with Sheriff Brennan's cold, threatening stare. Her chest tightened for a moment, anxiety flickering through her, but it was replaced just as quickly by fierce resolve. Thomas came up behind her, sensing her tension. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered with conviction, "Don't worry about him, Alicia. Today, we've shown that courage and solidarity always triumph, over power and prejudice alike." Alicia nodded, her eyes shining with renewed faith and hope. She knew this was only the beginning. Her fight with Brennan and the town's old biases wasn't over. But at this moment, she understood she was no longer alone. The bikers, her new friends, and the townspeople who'd chosen to stand with her were her greatest strength to overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. And on that explosive day in Red Valley, a town used to silence and prejudice, people finally grasped that courage and compassion are the forces that drive real change. What Alicia didn't yet know was that she hadn't only rattled Brennan's pride, she'd set him on a path toward an even bolder, more ruthless plan to reclaim his control. Alicia's battle, and the true test of her newfound alliances, was only just beginning. While Sheriff Brennan's cold gaze silently watched from afar, the atmosphere inside and around Alicia's diner began to shift in an astonishing way. Every little conversation between Red Valley's townspeople and the Hells Angels, bikers, was like a warm ray of sunshine gradually lifting the dense fog of long-held suspicion and prejudice. At one corner table, Mrs. Dorothy Watson was engrossed in conversation with Margaret, the silver-haired biker with a fierce look. Dorothy, long known as the most meticulous and conservative soul in town, was now listening intently as Margaret shared tales of epic cross, country rides, vivid experiences on the open road, and her beloved grandchildren waiting for her back home. Something had changed in Dorothy's eyes. Once filled with unease and distance, they now glowed with admiration and friendship. "I never imagined bikers could have such incredible stories." Dorothy smiled kindly, lightly squeezing Margaret's hand. "We've really been living in narrow-minded fear all these years." Margaret nodded gently, her eyes brimming with empathy. "Prejudice only survives because we've never truly sat down and listened to one another, Dorothy." At another table, Dave and Sarah Hill were eagerly chatting with Mike, a biker whose rugged exterior belied a warm smile. When Mike mentioned he'd served in the military, Dave was stunned to realize they'd once been stationed at the same base. Two men, once strangers, perhaps even adversaries, now reconnected like old friends. "I can't believe we were at the same base," Dave said, his voice earnest and grateful. "It's a shame it took until today for us to meet and understand each other like this." Mike agreed, his tone steady. "What matters is that we finally see the things that make us different aren't reasons to drive us apart." Alicia watched these exchanges with her heart swelling. Just yesterday, she'd feared prejudice would forever divide her small town. Now she witnessed those walls crumbling, giving way to genuine friendship and deeper understanding. Outside the window, Sheriff Brennan still stood there, his face growing more sullen by the minute, eyes etched with anger. Proud of his unquestioned authority in Red Valley, he now recognized his grip slipping as he watched townspeople's perceptions of Alicia and the bikers change. "What's your next move, Sheriff?" Tyler asked hesitantly, feeling the tension wrap around Brennan. After a long silence, Brennan's cold gaze remained fixed on the diner. When he spoke, his voice was bitter but resolute. "We can't let Alicia and those bikers upend the order in this town so easily. The people of Red Valley need to know who really holds the reins here." The sheriff's words sent a shiver down Tyler's spine. He feared Brennan was about to do something reckless, something dangerous with consequences far graver than what they'd faced so far. But Tyler lacked the courage to voice his concern, at least for now. Meanwhile, inside the diner, a little girl named Emily, sharing the same name as Marcus's daughter, ran gleefully between tables. Alicia watched her, her heart tightening with thoughts of Emily Reed, bravely fighting for her life in the hospital. She decided to call Marcus, hoping for encouraging news about him and his daughter. Marcus's weary voice came through on the phone, carrying a faint spark of hope. "Emily's still fighting hard, Alicia. The doctors say we still have a chance, however small." Alicia's eyes filled with tears as she replied, "Marcus, you and Emily aren't alone. The whole town is finally realizing what truly matters. Humanity and compassion always triumph over prejudice." After a brief, choked silence, Marcus's voice cracked with emotion. "Thank you, Alicia. You have no idea how much what you've done means to me and my family." When she hung up, Alicia felt that today was indeed a monumental turning point. Not just for her, but for all of Red Valley. Yet she couldn't shake the nagging sense that Sheriff Brennan wouldn't surrender so easily. This fight was far from over, and Alicia knew that to achieve ultimate victory, she and her new allies would need even more courage, unity, and love to protect the values they'd worked so hard to build. The walls of prejudice had begun to melt away, but the battle to safeguard this change had only just begun. The moment Alicia set her phone down, her emotions still running high, the diner door swung open once more, drawing curious, astonished glances toward the newcomer. Standing in the entrance, imposing yet with eyes shining bright with joy and hope, was Marcus Reed, the same fierce man she'd known, now transformed by an expression of genuine emotion. Alicia stood frozen for a heartbeat, her heart pounding in her chest, then rushed forward, her voice trembling. "Marcus, you made it. How's Emily?" Marcus looked at her, the eyes of a man who'd weathered countless storms now gentler than ever. He took a deep breath before speaking, his voice brimming with gratitude and joy. "Emily is recovering remarkably well, Alicia. The doctors say the new treatment she's on is exceeding expectations. They told me just a few hours ago that she finally has real hope." Hearing this, Alicia felt the world light up around her. A wave of relief and joy washed away her remaining fears. She couldn't hold back her emotion. She threw her arms around Marcus in a heartfelt, tearful embrace, two people bonded by shared suffering and hope. Marcus looked surprised for a moment, then returned the hug with deep gratitude. "Thank you, Alicia," he whispered. "It was your kindness that gave me the strength not to give up, to believe in this miracle for Emily." Alicia stepped back, tears in her eyes. "Marcus, you and Emily are the brave ones. I just did what my father taught me. Stand up for what's right, trust in people, and always believe in the best." Marcus offered one of his rare smiles, looking at her with sincere appreciation. "No, Alicia, you have no idea how much that small act changed everything. Emily keeps asking about you, the woman who had the courage to protect her father when the world turned its back." His words struck Alicia with their weight. Her simple act had reignited hope not just in Marcus and Emily, but in the heart of all Red Valley. Yet amid that joy, Alicia sensed another gaze, cold and hard, from outside the door. Sheriff Brennan still stood there, his face colder and more furious than ever, the lines of anger etched deep into his features. He saw Marcus's return as proof his plan to control Alicia, and the town was slipping away. "Marcus," Alicia urged softly, glancing toward Brennan. "Sheriff Brennan isn't going to give up. I'm afraid he won't let this go quietly." Marcus met her worry with resolve, his voice steady. "I know Brennan well, Alicia. He rules by fear. But what he'll never understand is that unity and courage are stronger than any power he can wield." He patted her shoulder encouragingly. "We're not alone anymore. You showed me that, Alicia. Now I stand with you, and all our friends here will too." Alicia nodded, her heart swelling with hope. She knew the fight wasn't over, but she no longer felt fear. Looking around the diner, once cold and divided, now alive with shared laughter between townspeople and bikers, she saw living proof that prejudice could be melted away by genuine compassion. Marcus squeezed her hand and smiled with certainty. "No matter what Brennan does next, we've already won a crucial battle, Alicia. This town is changing, and it's because a brave young woman chose to do what's right." Alicia returned his smile, warmth flooding her heart. She knew the road ahead would be long and hard, but she trusted in kindness, in human solidarity, and in the miracles they could achieve together. Miracles she'd nearly thought lost forever. What Alicia and Marcus didn't know was that Sheriff Brennan's anger and hatred had reached a boiling point. He was quietly plotting a darker, more dangerous plan to seize back control of the town at any cost. A new battle was about to begin, and this time, the challenge facing Alicia and her allies would be greater than anything they'd faced so far. While Alicia and Marcus were still sharing their relieved smiles, the diner door opened once more, and Thomas Reed entered alongside Sarah. The look of seriousness on Thomas's face immediately drew everyone's attention, and the diner fell silent, as if sensing he was about to deliver an important message. Thomas walked to the center of the room, his gaze confident yet warm and respectful. He scanned the faces of townspeople and Hell's Angels members standing together, then spoke quietly but firmly. "I'm sorry to interrupt everyone's joy and conversation, but I have something important to say right now." His words instantly hushed the diner, every pair of eyes fixed on him with curious anticipation. Thomas drew a deep breath, his voice strong and clear. "Everyone here knows what's happened recently. Alicia Bennett, a courageous woman, has endured far too much injustice simply because she stood up to protect one of our own. I believe it's time to make something very important perfectly clear." He paused briefly, locking eyes through the window onto Sheriff Brennan, who stood outside tense and scowling. Brennan clenched his fists, clearly bracing himself for Thomas's declaration. "The Hell's Angels never forget those who showed us kindness in our darkest hour," Thomas continued, each word ringing with authority. "From this moment on, Alicia Bennett's diner will be under our protection. Anyone who harasses or troubles Alicia will be declaring war on every Hell's Angel here." A thunderous roar of applause erupted from the bikers, and many of the townspeople too. Thomas's promise meant that Alicia would never be alone again, and the relief she felt was immense. Outside, Sheriff Brennan's face reddened with anger and impotent frustration. He knew this proclamation directly challenged the power he'd always wielded, yet he also realized he could do nothing against such unity and resolve. He ground his teeth, casting a glare first at Thomas, then at Alicia, the woman he blamed for all this turmoil. "Fine," Brennan muttered under his breath, loud enough for Deputy Collins to hear. "If they want to fight, I'll show them the price they'll pay." Tyler Collins looked at Brennan, worry etched on his face. "Sheriff, what are you planning next?" Brennan said nothing, eyes coldly fixed on the diner, on Thomas, Marcus, and Alicia standing united. He knew he'd lost today's battle, and the bitterness of that loss only fueled his resolve to exact harsher revenge. Inside, Alicia turned to Thomas, her eyes full of deep gratitude. In a choked voice, she whispered, "Thomas, I truly don't know how to thank you all enough." Thomas patted her shoulder gently, his tone caring but resolute. "No, Alicia, we're the ones who should thank you. Your bravery inspired all of us to stand up against prejudice and injustice, and now the Hell's Angels will always stand by you." Marcus, standing beside Alicia, smiled with pride. He understood that today's event not only protected Alicia, it boldly affirmed that courage and solidarity are the sharpest weapons against any wrong. Red Valley's townspeople began to surround Alicia and the bikers, offering heartfelt thanks from every direction. Those who once feared or avoided Alicia now looked at her with admiration and respect. They realized it was Alicia, a brave young woman who paved the way for them to change, to step out of their comfort zones, to conquer the deep, seated biases of their town. Yet, amid this celebration of unity and victory, Alicia couldn't forget the cold, hateful glare Brennan had directed at her through the window. She knew Thomas's declaration was a major turning point, but the war was far from over. Brennan wouldn't relent, and the greatest challenges still lay ahead. For now, though, Alicia felt stronger than ever. She knew she had done the right thing, and she was no longer alone. The Hell's Angels, her new friends, and the people of Red Valley all stood with her. What Alicia didn't know was that, from that very moment, Sheriff Brennan resolved to risk everything, using the most ruthless methods, to retake control of the town and punish those who dared defy him. A terrifying new plan was already brewing, promising to make the next battle more intense and brutal than anything they'd faced so far. Immediately following Thomas Reed's powerful declaration, public sentiment in Red Valley began to shift dramatically, directed squarely at Sheriff Brennan, who had never before faced any real opposition. For the first time in a long while, Brennan felt the weight of pressure from the very people he once took for granted. Tension gripped the small town as whispering rumors spread. Neighbors started questioning Brennan's past actions, particularly his open threats against Alicia and his unjust treatment of Marcus based on personal prejudice. Gradually, townspeople felt a pang of shame as they realized their silence had enabled such blatant abuse of power. A few days later, on a misty morning, the Red Valley Town Hall filled with dozens of residents and Hell's Angels members. An unprecedented hearing was convened. Sheriff Brennan himself was summoned to explain his conduct. Standing beside him, Deputy Tyler Collins kept his head bowed, avoiding the angry stares. Thomas Reed took position before the assembled crowd, with Marcus and Alicia at his side, eyes fierce yet concerned. Stepping up to Brennan, Thomas's voice rang out strong and clear. "Sheriff Brennan, you promised to protect this town with justice and fairness, but the way you treated Alicia Bennett and my brother Marcus betrayed that promise completely. Do you realize the serious consequences of your actions?" Thomas's words struck like daggers to Brennan's pride. For a moment, Brennan stood silent, struggling to contain his rising fury and shame. "I only did what I thought was best to protect this town," Brennan finally replied, his usual confidence gone, his tone icy. Marcus immediately stepped forward, his gaze hard and challenging. "Protect the town, or protect your own power and selfish interests? You used your authority to bully the vulnerable, spreading fear and dividing the community. That is not justice. That is the abuse of power." Marcus's bold accusation drew heartfelt applause from the hall. Brennan lowered his head, feeling helpless before the undeniable truth. He glanced around, meeting disappointed and outraged eyes belonging to people who once trusted him completely. From the crowd, Mrs. Dorothy Watson, long a respected elder, advanced with a stern yet sorrowful expression. "Sheriff Brennan, I once had great faith in you, but what you've done to Alicia has deeply disappointed me. She is part of this town, and you drove her away out of your own pride and prejudice." Her words were the final straw, prompting murmurs of assent from every corner. Brennan knew he could no longer evade accountability. He had to face his mistakes publicly. Thomas moved in closer, his voice calm but laden with gravity. "Sheriff Brennan, you owe Alicia a sincere public apology. Only when you acknowledge your wrongs can our town truly heal the wounds you've inflicted." All eyes turned to Brennan, the once mighty, proud sheriff now standing bitter and powerless. After a long pause, he exhaled deeply and spoke with a sincerity he'd never shown before. "Alicia, I was wrong. I let my pride and prejudice cloud my judgment. I caused you pain you did not deserve. I apologize to you and to everyone here for what I have done." A hush fell over the hearing as his apology sank in. Alicia stepped forward, her eyes glistening with tears but shining with strength and compassion. "I accept your apology, Sheriff. But more importantly, from this day on, all of us, this entire town, must change. We must learn to treat one another with respect and kindness. We need to leave the past behind and build a better future together." The room erupted in genuine, thunderous applause. Brennan looked at Alicia with honest respect for the first time, realizing that true power doesn't come from control or fear, but from the courage to admit one's mistakes, to understand others, and to change for the better. Yet deep inside, Brennan's bitterness lingered. He knew he had lost much of the community's trust, and that regaining it would be a long road. But in that moment, he accepted that the first step toward redemption was confronting his past, and he owed that hard-won lesson to the bravery and perseverance of a young woman named Alicia Bennett. Sheriff Brennan's sincere apology was like a breath of fresh air sweeping through Red Valley, scattering decades of dust from prejudice and doubt. In the days that followed, old wounds slowly healed, and the walls that had divided neighbors for so long came down, replaced by genuine compassion and solidarity. Alicia's diner soon filled again, something she could barely have imagined just weeks before. Formerly distant neighbors now walked through her door with warm smiles and friendly eyes, ordering meals and coffee while chatting as if she'd never been gone. The town buzzed again with laughter and everyday stories. Simple, cozy moments Alicia had longed for during those dark weeks. Even Sheriff Brennan, still a bit tentative and embarrassed, began returning to the diner with a more respectful demeanor. Each time he entered, he gave a slight nod of the head, a small gesture of genuine humility. Brennan knew it would take time to rebuild trust, but more importantly, he'd learned a life lesson. True authority comes from understanding and mercy, not the fear he once wielded. Standing behind her counter, Alicia beamed as she took in the bustling scene. Regulars mingling with new friends from the Hells Angels, the chatter and clinking cups filling the room. Proudly displayed on the wall beside her father's faded apron was the leather vest Thomas and Marcus had gifted her, a powerful symbol of the unity and courage that had carried her through. Marcus and Thomas had become treasured friends to both Alicia and the town. They visited often, sharing inspiring tales from their long journeys. Alicia knew she was no longer alone, and that she had helped forge a meaningful bond between Red Valley and the bikers, once so deeply misunderstood. One peaceful weekend evening, after closing the diner, Alicia slipped into the hospital room where her father, James Bennett, lay resting. He had taught her the values of kindness and justice from the very beginning. Sitting beside him, she held his frail hand and spoke softly but proudly. "Dad, I've never forgotten what you taught me. Judge people by their actions and their hearts, not by how they look or what color they are. Because of you, I found the courage to stand up when it mattered and the strength to face every challenge." Her father's tired eyes scanned her face, a quiet pride shining through. Alicia smiled, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes, but her heart was stronger and more hopeful than ever. "Everything's changed," she continued. "Our town is more united than it's ever been, and I know you'll always be proud of me, because I stayed true to what you taught me." Leaning in, Alicia pressed a gentle kiss to his hand before rising to leave. She understood then that her journey had not only transformed her little town, but had helped her grow, teaching her the real power of courage, honesty, and human kindness. Stepping out under the starlit sky, Alicia felt a serenity she hadn't known in ages. She knew challenges would never cease, but she also knew she was strong enough to meet them, and, most importantly, she was never alone. Returning to her warmly lit diner, Alicia paused inside to breathe in the memories and friendships that now filled every corner. She knew her story, and the stories of Marcus, Thomas, and all the people of Red Valley would continue. But the most important lesson they'd learned was to open their hearts and embrace one another, no matter how different they seemed. Here, in the cozy heart of Red Valley's little diner, Alicia realized that love, bravery, and understanding are the unshakable foundations that help us weather any storm and build a brighter future together. This story of Alicia and Red Valley, shows us that courage and kindness can break down any barrier, opening doors to hope and unity. What do you think of Alicia's decision to protect Marcus? Would you have the courage to do the same in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story meaningful, please like and share to spread its message. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next inspiring tales. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.